Hello, everybody out there. How's it going? I hope you're doing well, and thank you for waiting. Looks like we are up and rolling now. Welcome to the Bardstream. This is actually number 8, and as before, this is something that I do once a month to talk about all things D&D and RPGs and fantasy and writing and characters and monsters and world building and just kind of all the stuff that I am passionate about and that I love. And I think you are interested in it too. And I'll be talking about some things. I'll be responding to some questions from the chat. This gives you a chance to interact a bit with me. Also, I have a special guest coming on, one of my VIPs from Patreon. He also plays in my Tuesday night group. Um, Actually, before I bring him on, I just had a thought right before I went live that I've never actually taken the time to show like what the hell I even do on my Patreon. So for those of you that don't know, I'll just give you a quick look at it. So put a link down in the video description, and like everyone on Patreon, I've got these different levels. The first level is like $1 a month, and it gives you access to all these Bard streams because I only keep them up publicly for a couple days, and then they just essentially go into unlisted. So you can't find them unless you actually have the link, and the link is there for anyone who's on my Patreon. And then there's a $3 level, which gets you a map. Actually, I release a free version of the map every month. It's a smaller one. And then those that are patrons, it's at least twice as big, sometimes 3 times bigger. And maps that you can use for D&D and role-playing online. And then I do this newsletter. Again, there's a free version. Everyone just publicly available. And then also there is a patron version. Patrons that are subscribed at $5 and above get access to the full version, and it includes 2 monsters a month and 2 patrons every month are chosen. It's a random selection. I roll like a D112 or a D130 or whatever I have. And pick 2 people, and they provide the concepts for the monsters. And then I take those little ideas, those little nuggets, and I put bard magic on them. Yeah. And then they turn into something. And I do a full 5th edition stat block for them that you can use in your own games. And I do some art. I've actually recently experimented with contracting an artist, and I'd like to do some more of that. But 99% of the time I'm doing the art. And I write lore and adventure hooks and stuff. Anyhow, here's a quick glance. This one is from February 2019, and I do a little update for myself. Yeah, so here's a sample monster, the Harbinger of Madness. And you've got a stat block, and I try to make mechanics that are interesting, that are unique things that you haven't seen before. I mean, part of it you've seen before, right? It's going to be 5th edition and within that framework, and it will be familiar to you. But I always try to add in at least 1, if not 2 or 3 unique things that spice up the game and introduce something that the players haven't seen before, and maybe can reward them for switching up their tactics and rolling with curveballs. And I try to do some really cool lore as well, lore that gives you like a little story you can read, or it gives you something you can work with as an adventure hook, a way to actually go somewhere with the monster and do something with it. And then I always have this little bit at the end. This one is some magic items, but like last time it was talking about random encounter environments and starting distances and starting motivations. Instead of just every time a random encounter, the monster is roar, I jump out of the bushes and I want to attack you and eat you or sacrifice you to my dark god. There's like 100 different motivations for what the monster might be doing. It might be like, feeding its babies or building a lair or try to conquer a region or setting a trap for you, or sleeping, or there could be all sorts of different situations. and that's in the free version. It's just that that $5 a month version that has the monsters, and then everything else is available in the free version. Oh yeah, I've also got this adventurer tier, though it hasn't been open for quite some time. So that's been what you all know as the Land of Dreams and Nightmares. Those are like the adventurer tier patrons, and I'm not quite sure how to upgrade that or expand upon that. There's only so much I can do. Speaking of other adventures, why don't I bring my guest in? He plays in my Tuesday night group. Ben!
Hello.
Hi!
Hi.
Welcome!
It's good to be here.
Good to see you, man. We had a nice chat the other night. It was a good conversation.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
And that gave me sort of an appetizer of the main idea that you have. And I'll be honest with you, I've kind of put it out of my mind. So it's almost going to be like you're just asking me it for the first time ever. And I'll just be coming up with something off the spot. Maybe it's simmered and ruminated in the back of my mind. But anyhow, tell us about your topic. You brought something.
Oh, well, I think before we talked about today, we talked about exactly my job in real life. I brought it up to the group. I was a paramedic, and you kind of were interested in that, and kind of what it entails. So basically, I'm a paramedic, and I ride around in an ambulance all day with a partner who's an EMT. And then if we get like a call or a run, which for like a sick patient, we'll go and do that and be kind of an aid to that person and make that person's day a little better than all things considered. And I think we talked a little bit about like my personal experiences with that. I brought a couple that I wanted to talk about too. That really kind of were important ones to me.
Sure.
I think,
and just to frame this for everyone, I love hearing people's experiences and stories from their life. That is a wealth of inspiration for me. I mean, it's more than inspiration as well, right? It's like just good old fashioned having a chat and friendship and stuff. But from a writer, storyteller, lover of role playing games, from that perspective, like you get so much from that. You can use real world stories that people tell you, and maybe that will inspire you to make an adventure in D&D, or to make an NPC that you can put into your world. Or maybe it won't directly get copy and pasted into your world, but it will just kind of enter the general I don't know, the cauldron of inspiration inside of you, and you can draw upon that in an indirect way later.
I've certainly been able to tap into some creative powers with my job, for sure.
Yeah, you can tap into a creative power, and I think that's so valuable. How many times have you played a game where, and maybe it's a tabletop role-playing game or maybe a video game, and it just feels so hollow, like lifeless, unhuman. It's just so disconnected from actual human experience. And
yeah,
typically those are not good games, or at least the story side of it, you just forget about it and you don't care.
Or it's just like a gnawing thing that the game's fine, the gameplay's fun, the story's okay, but there's just something like an elephant in the room that you can't quite put your finger on. And it's usually
like something's missing.
Yeah. I was actually watching a video for Baldur's Gate, and something that I was pointed out by the video was that it's very similar. I drive around the city where I live most of the time, so the one thing that the video was talking about was, it's D&D related, is that Baldur's Gate's like their cities are not laid out for you, the player, and the world is not built for you, the player. The world is just a world. It's naturally occurring. Sometimes, like the city I live in, I mean, it was relatively planned, but grew naturally. And I think that some games kind of miss the mark on stuff like
that. You might have got a little taste of that from the campaign that you're playing in. The Tuesday night one. Yeah.
Yes.
I like that. Yeah, I
Bit off
like that
more than I could
concept that
chew.
it's a living, breathing world with its own dynamics and NPCs and monsters that have their own motivations and lives. And then you can insert yourself, you, the characters, right, can insert yourself into that in whatever approach you think is the right one to whatever effect, maybe a great effect, maybe a disastrous one.
And it's been some of the most fun games I think I've ever played. I mean, that clearly that takes years of refining your trade to present that kind of illusion of the mind that the
Mm-hmm.
thing that the whole world is really in your is alive. It's real. It's there, and it's palpable. You can do things, and then you can feel the consequences of those choices.
Thank you. Well, I do have a lot of experience. That's true. But I think it's something that anyone can do if you just take a moment to, instead of rushing things, take a moment to reflect in your mind, what would that person, that NPC, actually do? Let them come to life in your head. Don't think of them as just a stat block on the paper, but think of them more as a living, breathing thing that it wants to, whatever. I mean, obviously it wants to survive, but it probably has a job, family, friends, enemies, a boss that it maybe gets along with or doesn't get along with so well, and has some kind of function, and it has its own little quirks, and everyone's that way. If you just take a moment and let that come to life and think about that, um, that can get you kind of in the right direction. That can start forming that a good habit that I think helps you develop a sense of immersion and um, investment. Yeah, because we get invested in things when they seem genuine and we can relate to them in some kind of way.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I agree wholly on that. I think that's just, you know, you get more comfortable doing that over time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still not as comfortable with it. I've been playing D&D for years.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
I mean, largely it is just a matter of practice. You just
mhm,
start developing the habit, and you keep doing that, and then over time the habit becomes experience, and you can just rely on that experience. That can be the steed you come riding in upon. It's gonna carry you somewhere. You can trust
mhm.
in it.
And that cause and effect, it really does kind of play into like even my career. I mean, just the like that's particularly with certain things when you learn going through school is the whole thing is cause and effect. We have a question. It's kind of a vague kind of guide for new paramedics is if this then what,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of how you have to treat people because you have to go okay if it's their heart's beating too fast then what do I do, and that's kind of how you approach the whole thing. Um, I learned that very, very quickly on my very first call I ever had, which was um, a cardiac arrest. For people who don't know what that is where your heart stops beating. Um, and this was I was my, I mean, I was as green as could be, and it was my first time really being in a firehouse since my dad was a firefighter. What long, years before that, and it was a nerve wracking experience, but it was led by a very competent and very seasoned paramedic who gave out instructions and was very encouraging to the whole team and was more of a positive, uh, like a positive encouragement as we moved along,
Mm-hmm.
and then through those efforts, that person then walked out of the hospital about 3.5 weeks later. I was sitting in class, and one of the preceptor medics came in and pulled me aside. He said, "Hey, I wanted to tell you that that person walked out of the hospital today, and the whole team, including yourself, are contributors to that." So it was
Yeah,
like a big victory, and it was my first kind of
a big boost of confidence to keep you
yeah,
along that path.
And it was even better, like even just in short term. I mean, we knew we had something when we got to the hospital. Like he was what we call biting the tube, which means he's coming around. And we took him to a hospital that when you drop patients off there and you're getting your truck ready to head back out, they have like drinks and ice cream. So we had like a water bottle and ice cream kind of hurrah for everybody, which was kind of even a short term reward in that. Uh, and you
And they were playing the Ewok song for the end of
yeah
Return of the
yeah
Jedi.
yes, and we were all walking down the
Yep, yep,
aisle,
yep, yep,
people
yep,
clapping,
yep.
fireworks.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. At least in
Or at
my head.
least, yeah, you feel that though inside of you. It is
Hmm.
like some kind of celebratory music is playing inside your heart. Things seem right in the world, and there's, you know, there's just a ray of light, after a dark storm, a sense of
Yeah,
hope, and fantastic.
and I mean, that is really uh, it's made me notice a lot of things about RPGs, particularly D&D types of
Hmm.
characters. I mean, we see all types of characters out in the world, just doing our ever job every day.
Sure.
Um,
And you've got the name of your character. You left it on there, which is totally fine. The
oh,
Thaddeus Wade, your character from the Tuesday Night group, who is a
yep.
wizard.
Hmm.
And, we often associate healing with clerics and divine. But I don't know, in a way, do you think a paramedic is more like a wizard? It seems
I
logical. It's like a applied science.
Yeah, and it's all about preparation. And it's
Hmm.
weird when you get on it when you get a call, they already have like dispatch information on what we call the CAD. Um, and it's basic information, like middle-aged woman, chest pain,
Hmm.
something simple like that. And then already it's like it's like kind of the prepping going into a dungeon where you're like, okay, dungeon,
Or preparing your
necromancer
spells.
and undead. So you prepare your spells for what you're going to face,
Yeah.
and then it's the same thing. I mean, there's a lot of similarity to that. You prepare your equipment, what you're going to take in. Um, you have a giant protocol book full of pretty much everything you can do, and when you know what you're going into, like a chest pain, it's you basically can just take 3 or 4 pages from that protocol book
Hmm.
and apply those. So yeah, I would say that's actually very similar to a wizard or
Yeah.
some kind of preparing spellcaster even. Um,
Defibrillator are those shock panels.
yeah, yeah,
So
they're
defibrillator could be like shocking grasp.
exactly. And I've actually considered using it that way just by looking at the spell when I asked you if I could switch to it. I was like, oh man, I wonder if I could, if that ever came happen, like that'd be awesome.
So then you have to get into questions of like, okay, do people in this quasi medieval fantasy world know to associate a little jolt of lightning or what we would call electricity restarting the heart? Do they understand how the heart works? I guess it just depends on the setting.
And
Like
that's
maybe Eberron would understand that, but
it's, it's kind of
Ravenloft would not, or Dark Sun would not.
it's kind of backwards too because it's not pleasant
I
to
imagine
be
not.
shocked. Like it's not pleasant one bit.
Give me a
uh
comparison. Like the defibrillator is equivalent to what other thing shocking me?
uh well, I mean,
Like
the only
sticking
other
a
thing I
fork into the outlet, or less than that?
no, it's far more dangerous.
Okay.
I would say the people equate it to the feeling of being kicked in the chest by a horse.
Yeesh.
I mean, it is a knock. Like you really feel it. And you got to think these people. I mean,
If you shocked that into a living person, could it put them into cardiac arrest?
oh, absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
okay, yeah.
Now we do. There's two kinds of shocks. There's defibrillate, right, and then there's what we call synchronized cardiovert,
Hmm.
which
And
is
defibrillates the reset,
defibrillate is the hard reset. It
the hard
is it
reset.
is
Yeah,
the whole. It is all the joules, which is how we measure our electrical
all the
power.
jewel. Okay, like Jules, joules.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, at first I heard jewels like, rubies and diamonds, and it's like, okay, it's all or nothing, all the jewels, all in, because at that point it's like, if we don't do this, he's dead for sure. So
Yeah, yeah,
you got to
and that's
go, it's
true.
all in or nothing.
And that's true. I mean, when you're 25 minutes into an arrest, I mean, and everything else has been expended,
Hmm.
it's like, I mean, we could try to shock them. You kind of have to ask for permission from the doc, because if they're in a rhythm you can't shock, then you're going against protocol. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, you try everything you can. At that point, it's one of them things. It's like, well, it's what quality of life is that person going to have if you
Yeah.
succeed? Um, but yeah, and then like the
And you
synchronized
probably
cardio,
have
there,
to try to check with the family. I mean, if you can.
yeah, family can be very helpful, but family can also be a huge obstacle.
I imagine that could be a tremendous obstacle.
They I it's it,
I used to have a student who was a pediatrician, and he told me that the biggest obstacle in his job are the kids' parents.
mm,
Not
yeah.
that they don't mean well. Actually, it is because they mean so well and they're so worried about their kids that they end up freaking out, overreacting, jumping to conclusions, getting in the way, etc.
Well, and another thing is sometimes the parent, and this is not a knock on parents. Parents are sometimes the best uh, historians and clinicians for their children.
Yeah,
But
first aid.
sometimes parents know more about how what their child's going through than what you would know about what I'm going through if I was going
Mm,
through something. You know,
mhm,
it's another person, and they're they're feeling things that you're not feeling, or they maybe are. Some kids sometimes are just too embarrassed to say.
mhm,
Just they're they don't want to. It's weird. Kids can
mhm,
be, when it comes to medicine. Children are where they're kind of the monkey wrench.
mhm.
So uh,
Sure. Well, adults are that way too, and kids are like less articulate adults,
mhm,
less experienced. All right, so even
mhm.
more so. Now, I remember you mentioning some question you had for me about wizards.
Mm. I
Was there a
had
wizard topic specifically?
Yes, there was a wizard topic specifically that I had. Basically, it was kind of a philosophy question. It's the what is a wizard? We run around in this magical world. There's warlocks and sorcerers, and in some cases clerics,
Mm-hmm.
monks, and even fighters that are flinging spells. So what is it that makes the wizard exceptional? And
Mm-hmm.
we've tested, like the players have discussed, like me and Bittersteel and Fada have and Katria have discussed this a lot, which is like, mechanically wizards are kind of the utility caster. They're, all this other things. But it got me thinking pretty deeply, what is a wizard? You know,
Mm-hmm.
class trope is kind of the face of what we think a class is. Like when you see
Mm-hmm.
someone in robes, you may think they're a priest or a mage. When you see
Mm-hmm.
somebody in heavy armor, there's some sort of warrior.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there's something deeper to that. So I was going to ask you, what is a wizard?
Mm-hmm.
What is a wizard in your mind when you think of a wizard?
I think of knowledge. Think of someone who studies and learns, and they know about a lot of different things, and they particularly know about mystical things,
Hmm.
mysterious things. Um, I think of arguments as well. And this would be similar to how scientists will argue. And I mean that in both meanings of the word, both in terms of like, you construct theorized arguments that you pose to the community, and then also in the like, the agitated, frustrated, angry arguments. I think of those as well with wizards, right? Because they are attempting to unlock and unravel the mysteries of the universe and write it down, codify it, put it in some sort of formula that you can make sense out of it and you can repeat it reliably. And, for the sake of the game having like cohesion, it always works. You know, The magic always works the way that it says in the player's handbook, unless the DM is being creative or unless you do some kind of house rule. Magic missile does magic missile every time. It does that same thing. And unseen servant does what unseen servant says it does. There's not like, it's like somebody has already perfected the formula long ago and you're just repeating what they were able to distill out of the ether through their experimentations and their learning and then put into the books. I don't know if this is a tangent or just a kind of a flowing with this same thought. I've often thought about what the hell is actually in the wizard's spell book. I think that would be really cool if someone made a book about that, or maybe I will get this idea. I've talked to Fada about it some too, about, a 5e supplement that I'll release. Maybe it'll be my next product or this upcoming one. And it's like, secrets and lore and forbidden knowledge and all the times in a D&D campaign, of which there are many, where it's like you find some old spell book, you go to the library and look at books, you discover some secret, be careful of the dark secrets, the forbidden knowledge that the warlocks possess, the god of secrets or Vecna. But there's never any book or any source material that tells you what the hell those things actually are. Like when you open up a wizard spellbook, is it just a bunch of these cryptic looking symbols and like you just can't make heads or tails of it unless you yourself are a practiced wizard? Like I have a friend who is a computer programmer, software developer. He plays in my Saturday night group, actually just a good friend of mine. And he wrote some computer programming stuff into some messages. I don't think I'm going to be able to find it so fast to just read it on the stream. I would like to. I think it gives you a taste of what it might be like to read. Oh, here we go. It's a trick we use that's based on the radix of a counting system. A radix 10 system is what we use. Each digit can be one of 10 choices, 0 to 9. And arithmetic is familiar. Radix 2, base 2, or binary is really useful for systems relying on one of two states, like a single bit, which is a 1 or a 0. Other systems are translated from binary based on use cases. Text, for instance, can be encoded in various formats. We like to use radix, and he just goes on like this. And I'm like, that must be something like what it would be for a non-wizard to read a wizard's spell book.
Yeah.
Or have you ever watched Vsauce?
No.
Oh, huge YouTuber, man. He's also from Kansas, by the way. He has a bunch of really interesting videos about science and the world and humans and just curious topics. And he has this one video that's about like, oh my God, it's math based. And it's like, what is beyond infinity? And I watched this video and I felt like I was going through different dimensions of existence. And I got done and I thought, this feels like I just listened to an expert wizard explain to me stuff from his spell book, and I'm not a wizard.
Right.
It's it's blowing your mind, and it's like reaching out beyond the general sphere of reality and knowledge that most people have. But you can't actually say what it really is unless you're someone who is very practiced in that field, someone who knows the esoterica.
That is a very good take. I mean, now I am gonna have to think about some stuff after this.
Right. But what if it's not just these cryptic symbols, like a foreign language that you can't read it unless you're a wizard and you kind of know the language of wizardry? What if it's written in actual tongues, right? It's written in common. It's a human wizard's spell book, and it literally says in common, raise your right hand in the quintuple star formation, slowly, while directly underneath you are waving your left hand at the, what would he say? I'm not going to say frequency. That sounds too science, too modern. At the velocity of the, of the fifth elemental wind and chant Ra Lika, and that will produce a a cone of flame at 5 paces at its greatest extent, uh, conjuring sufficient fiery blast to fell a typical common foot soldier, which we, meta translate that as like, oh, it's a 15-foot cone and it does 3d6 of fire damage.
Right.
I mean, maybe it's in language like that. And because I could just go to the store or even just online and download a advanced math or physics book, and I could read it. And like, I speak English and it's in English, but I've never gone to those classes, and I've never had a tutor or a professor walk me through it and really explain exactly how I'm supposed to apply this. I'm going to get all kinds of things wrong and burn my fingernails off.
Yeah. I I don't have to think a lot about this afterwards. This is gonna be good. My fiance is gonna hate me because I as I told you earlier, I get into these deep thinking fits, we'll say, where I'm contemplating my ideas, and I'm throwing the old out and coming in with any new suggestions or thoughts I might have to try to change my mind and grow.
And you can
Man, that's
contrast this with other classes, because
yeah,
we'll stick with Burning Hands. Sorcerer can cast Burning Hands,
right. And
but
I
the
think that's
sorcerer
kind
didn't
of
study from a book or a wizard school or a master.
and that's kind of it's hard to kind of compare that to real life too,
Uh-huh.
because there's not really. I guess there's people who are just good at stuff. Like a sorcerer is kind of just good at casting spells. It's something they can naturally do.
It seems like it's a feeling,
Yeah.
like it
It.
seems emotion related.
Yeah, and like I couldn't.
We can imagine like the 13-year-old budding sorcerer getting heckled and bullied, and he, screams in frustration or anger, and then whoosh, fire comes out of his hands in an uncontrolled fashion. And then
Yeah.
does he just go alone by himself, behind the barn? Probably not a barn for fire. Behind the lake, behind the old rock, and just every day tries to tap into that emotion again until he can get it down. And
Mhm.
now at will, I've got that burning hands.
Yeah.
I can reproduce it the same way, instead of it shooting out my left ear and burning off half of a finger,
Yeah.
or accidentally burning down the barn.
But that's kind of like when you think about the spells, they require certain somatic and they require certain verbal components. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
if you were casting from that kind of emotion, do you really need to perfect some sort of somatic phrase or some sort of somatic motion?
Mm-hmm.
And is there a phrase that's gonna maybe tap into that emotion when you're casting the spell? And
And is
I
it the
think
same somatic and verbal component between sorcerer and wizard? Does a sorcerer also do the rak la li la, or is that just the wizard's way of doing it, and the sorcerer is like some kind of thing that he just figured out screaming behind the rock?
I don't know. That would be something that could potentially, uh, kind of have an immersion discussion if you like have multiple arcane spellcasters in a group. Like maybe you have a sorcerer and a wizard in your group. You kind of have to maybe then if both of them are you actually coming up with phrases to say, or maybe they, you know, work together to come up with their own arcane phrases. Like that's one of the
what
things.
what what do you like? Because I personally, I don't like the idea of the sorcerer doing it the same as the wizard. It seems, something about that doesn't seem right.
Yeah, I think I think sorcerers can kind of get by with the kind of stereotypical I just cast burning hands. I do the thing that I'm really good at, or maybe they come up with their own role play emotion that they feel whenever they cast that spell. That could be something that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And
You've
then,
mentioned emotion twice, and maybe the emotion is the same, but there's different approaches to get there. Like, the wizard. Let's use music as a metaphor. So let's say the emotion is a hot emotion. We'll
mhm,
stick with fiery hands, right? So maybe it's passion or it's anger. And you can get to passion and anger with, say, classical music or jazz wizard, or you can get to it through punk or grunge sorcerer.
right. I, I, and I kind of took my own path with like how I was going to role play a wizard because I've experimented in fifth edition with mostly sorcerer warlock combinations, or even a paladin.
Mm-hmm.
But when you go through, like, this is one thing I talked about with the other players, was you go through the wizard's character features,
Mm-hmm.
and they're pretty bare bones. I mean, they don't really give, like, the sorcerer has very flavorful class features that kind of feed into the type of sorcerer you are. Wizards have their schools, but I think we talked earlier when we had our
Wizard
discussion.
feels more academic, which I think is intentional, and
Mhm.
sorcerer feels more like thematic creative.
Right. And I think that wizards, if you were to put them in any kind of educational domain, it would obviously be the sciences, but
Mm-hmm.
it's because I think each type of wizard, whether you're a necromancer or an enchanter, you come to the same conclusion about how the weave would work or how magic in general works, and yet you just have different hypotheses of your science compared to other sciences. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that you guys still, like, the scientific method is still is baseline, whether you're an astrologist or whether
Mm-hmm.
you're a biologist.
Yeah,
The scientific method remains the same.
sure.
But the I guess the what you're reaching for with your method is kind of the separate archetypes for wizard. And that kind of, if you compare that to other classes, is not the case. I mean, a shadow sorcerer and a draconic bloodline sorcerer are very different. And the different types of warlocks, I mean, warlocks kind of a dress up Mr.
Mm-hmm.
Potato Head class just on its own because
Yeah.
it's so versatile. And then, druids are, just I'm just picking classes at random. Druids are,
Let me throw something out there.
yeah.
Imagine that in a world of fantasy, the sorcerers came first. I'm talking about like in the beginning of mankind, right?
Mhm.
Sorcerers came first. It's this innate thing, and it was there from the beginning. Wizards came later. It was like technology. It took time. Like there wasn't even reading and writing in the beginning, right? It was all primitive stuff.
Right.
There could be a primitive sorcerer, but there can't be a primitive wizard.
Inventions came before writing.
It was an evolution of
Mhm.
technology over time. So wizards came later. The
Like the
sorcerers, they developed these incantations that involve the physical gestures and these verbal things, and they come to them innately. Maybe they just feel it. You feel like when I did that scream, the fire came out. I can feel that same gesture again. It's an emotion. It's a sensation in the body. Maybe you have a dream about it. Maybe there's just something in your blood, like an ancestral lineage, speaking to you in your unconsciousness, or the shadow bloodline whispering in your mind. And then the wizard develops later, and the wizards observe the sorcerers, and they say, okay, when the sorcerer does, this kind of gesture, that's kind of a wild fling, but every time it's this,
Mhm.
and he says, like some crude, what did I say before, like unra lika,
Yeah.
it's not a clear unra lika, it's just like a, I don't know. it's a a cruder, more raw form of it. And then the wizards are like, okay, we're going to refine that. And it's like from the top down, analyzing, like reverse engineering what the sorcerer did innately. And they refine it and they like codify, okay, this hand position, we're going to call it, the 5-point star. And it's associated with spells that start from a smaller point and project out in a cone like shape. And then this thing, what it is it's actually tapping like this one thread of the weave that has to do with fire. And we can refine the syllables into these reproducible syllables that they probably mean something in some like old tongue that the gods or demons or titans spoke or ancient dragons spoke.
Mm-hmm.
I could see that totally working for the lore of the D&D or fantasy world.
And I kind of went in one of the worlds that I created for some friends for a few sessions. Sorcery was actually, out of all the 3 arcane classes, you could be a wizard and work really, really hard for your magic. You could be a warlock and make a deal that may not end. You still have to provide something in return for that power. And that sorcerers were actually just outright banned. Just the idea of being able to tap in at will to whatever powers
like
to make up.
society would hunt
Yeah.
down and
Or you were kind of like the divinity world where if you're a source, they call them sorcerers, which is really funny, but if you can cast source, then you get arrested and collared, and the collar prevents you from casting source.
Have you ever played the Dragon Age games?
Mm-hmm.
The Tranquil?
Yeah.
I thought
Yes.
that was a fantastic bit of world building and disturbing as well.
Yeah. And and that's just
It's a little more interesting and nuanced than just we hunt down sorcerers and kill them.
mm-hmm.
It's more like we hunt down apostates, or not even apostates, maybe someone who can't control their magic and they're a threat to society, and we make them go tranquil.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, they cannot tap into magic and they cannot tap into any emotion at all. They are completely emotionless.
Awful. I always pick mages whenever I play Dragon Age, so
It's freaky. Yeah,
I
it's
always
freaky.
I always
It's damn good world building.
Yes. I and that kind of leads me to what I wanted to discuss, which was the idea of class trope. A lot of people
So now we have arrived at the
we have
what we
arrived.
actually are here to discuss. Okay.
I think a lot of people kind of tap in to class trope, and a lot of people are more open to, make it interesting. Whenever I DM, my rule is if you can pitch it to me, we'll make it work.
Yeah.
That's my if you can really pitch it to me. I mean, you really want something. Like one of my friends, he's actually here watching the stream. He's gonna make a barbarian, and he just wants an axe that can talk to him. Okay, we'll work with that.
I can imagine it.
And so
if I can imagine it, we can find an approach that will work.
I discovered something that is, I think, has been overlooked with that kind of mentality. Not that it's bad. There's no real bad way to look at D&D. However, there's some encouraging things you can take from these class tropes that have kind of built over time. We discussed kind of, even one of your videos, well, my favorite video, the wizard video, was, what is more iconic than the warrior and the mage?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, that all comes from, things like Tolkien, Arthurian lore, Merlin.
Sure. Well, they're archetypes of
Mm-hmm.
humanity.
Yeah.
The warrior or the soldier or even the hero, we could kind of say that's one. And then the wizard or the magician or the wise man or the shaman, that would be another one.
The scholar.
Scholar. But even before scholars, there would be some still kind of wise men, shamanic, tap into the spirit realm kind of person.
The Celtic druids.
Yeah. And he probably has skinny arms and he's older.
Yes.
He can talk a lot.
Oh man, that's probably my biggest weakness. So I wanted to tackle the stereotype for wizards of being the Gandalf of the party.
Hmm.
And the reason I like that one the best is Gandalf is one of my favorite characters. And when I do play wizards, I do tend to lean towards that archetype. And it's a bias, and it's something that I've had to take a more neutral look at when I was considering these thoughts I was having, which was that trope isn't a required thing, but it's very necessary. Because, for instance,
Hmm.
when we're thinking
Not
about
not required, but necessary.
not required but necessary,
Are you saying like you don't have to have tropes in order to make an RPG, but if you don't, you're missing out on an essential piece of the game?
in a bigger picture, absolutely.
Hmm.
When you're thinking about just being a player in your game, for example, I was thinking
Hmm.
about Thaddeus,
Hmm.
particularly with how I would play him and exactly what I was doing. I can roll a wizard, I can write the things down on the paper, and I can have my spells picked out. But why? I mean, it's one of those things that I go back to. Why did I not pick a warlock? Why did I not pick a sorcerer? And
Hmm.
the first thing I looked at was what is the ability score really that defines the wizard? And it's his intelligence.
Hmm.
Now I'm more when I think about the way I look at philosophy, my philosophy on things is I look towards humans more ancient, like you said, the shamans or the examples we have in our past. The thing I look towards is what is knowledge to humanity, and that would be the first book. And
Hmm.
heads up warning for everybody: I am going to bring up the Bible, but I'm not going to preach to anybody. The first book of the Bible, which the two characters in it, Adam and Eve, they eat from the tree of knowledge.
Hmm.
Knowledge being intelligence. The wizard has most of that. So
Knowledge
he
of good and evil. It
exactly.
was a naive state before that.
And that was what led humanity to its doom. Its doomed state. This idea that we are a doomed people, that we are born doomed. There is a day we will die, and that's what caused humanity to be doomed, which was eating from the tree of knowledge, having
Yeah.
that knowledge, and now they know that.
Yet we
Um,
can't have all these great stories without our mortality and our flaws and our
yes,
doom. Because who
absolutely,
wants to read the book of and they just hung out and things were nice?
absolutely, and
Chapter 20. I don't believe I've had cinnamon on apples before. Yes, let's try that now. And there's like 3 pages of them preparing the cinnamon and the apples and how nice it is when they eat it. Yeah, no one wants to read that.
no, there's a level of interest to the doomed tale, like the guy who sacrifices himself to save the party. Like his story is automatically interesting because of his, he had to he is the sacrifice to make the thing continue, make the adventure to continue to go
Hmm.
on, we'll say. So, the wizard, he knows things, he knows stuff. Maybe he even knows of some doom, some prophecy, some ungodly entity that's, slowly making its way to the world, and he's got to prepare for it. You know, the, it's all in the class. The wizard is the one who prepares. He even will go and seek spells to prepare for the future. He'll kind of what I like to say is he'll take the Tony Stark approach, where
Hmm.
he builds this armada of different Iron Men for different situations, and he knows something's coming, and maybe that
Oh,
something
is that
is
what happens?
maybe that something is
Okay. I've only
Thanos.
seen the first two Iron Man movies.
Oh well, he does it in the second one too, a little bit.
Does he? I've
He
forgotten that.
yeah.
All I remember from the second one is a guy with electric whips.
Hmm.
That's
Yep.
all I remember. Guy with
That's
electric whips. I kind of tuned out in that movie.
so you know um that's how I see kind of the baseline wizard is someone who knows things, someone who's going to prepare, someone who, and it may not be something ungodly. It could be like my character, for example. I'll share this with stream. Thaddeus knows that there is a diabolical shadow stalking him. Is this some world-ending entity? I don't know. Is this some personal demon? Most likely, that's what I've kind of taken from it, and I'm preparing for it, and I'm trying to prepare for it, and be the best wizard I can be to do that. Which gets to, every class has kind of their thing, right? Wizards, I mean, the spells are kind of their thing, but what I kind of lean more towards is their goal, like I said, with the preparation, is to also kind of be the I don't want to say moral center, but kind of the center of the party. Not in terms of you should always worry about the wizard, but they're the center in the party, similar to how Gandalf was the center of the story. Maybe the
More
moral center.
cool headed, or they have a like a broader perspective. They see things on a longer, wider point of
Yes.
view.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, when I contacted you about the things that I was thinking about for Thaddeus was the rivalry thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important too, because I think, fighters and barbarians and rogues, they train their skills and they work hard to do what they do, and they're constantly testing themselves. They're constantly, you know, barbarians are constantly proving themselves through feats of strength, perhaps.
Yeah.
Thieves are constantly
Sparring against uncooperative opponents.
rogues are maybe thieving to see how much they can get away with, something of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
What are wizards doing? I mean, they're kind of, outside of all the other spellcasters, they're kind of the more, we'll say, human of the spellcasters. I mean, sorcerers are just kind of naturally gifted.
Right. We can all relate to going to school and studying and learning,
Mm-hmm.
but we can't all relate so well to someone who was born with a mysterious, innate magical gift.
Mm-hmm. And so I thought about very deeply, what is Gandalf's rival? And the thing I always go back to is, people say, well, I don't want to be the Gandalf wizard. Okay, that's absolutely fine. You don't have to be robes and a beard and a pointy hat to be the Gandalf of your party.
Mm-hmm.
What you could do, though, is you have this rivalry. Maybe for me it's the shadow, or it's a person that I went to this academy with. um it could be, in your story, it could be a sibling, it could be a dragon, it could be a whatever thing your story is kind of themed on.
Another apprentice wizard from your academy that
Hmm.
what's the freaking Harry Potter kid that
Malfoy.
Malfoy?
Hmm. Absolutely. And you
Have you
that's
have you ever been to any school, any institution of learning where there weren't people competing or even being vicious towards one another? Some
hmm
people, right? There's always at least that like one guy or that one clique.
hmm and I mean, with the
I think of wizards debating with each other a lot, man. I think of them getting into heated arguments over their theorem and their practices.
and not so much how we would think of them, of like, fireball's better than lightning bolt at third level.
Well,
Like,
how much do people debate theories and philosophies in the real world, and then
oh, it's, I mean,
multiply that times magic? And yeah, I could see wizards like burning each other to the ground if things got too heated.
yeah, yeah. I Man, and that's
Evocation is clearly superior. You've
uh,
toted this erroneous idea since you were but a boy. Abjuration will cancel your evocation every time.
oh, pish posh, both of you are off your rocker. Divination is clearly the best school.
If you were such a great diviner, you would have known I was going to say that.
Uh, uh, ah! The storm out.
Enchanter chuckles in the corner. He forgot somehow. Right. And
Or maybe he's
the
the one who's
illusionist,
making us
you
all
all just
angry at
thought
each
you were
other.
debating in a classroom. We're actually here in the middle of the woods. Yeah.
The enchanter's the one who's made everybody angry. I mean,
Yeah.
he's
Wait a minute. Why did I even get angry in the first place? Footsteps padding away in the distance.
man. I say that all pretty. You brought up the Malfoy thing. That's a great another example. I mean, Harry Potter is mainstream as a wizard as possibly a wizard could be.
Mm-hmm.
He has loads of rivals. And his rivals, your rival doesn't have to be something that's static. Like you said, Malfoy, Voldemort's his rival, the troll, and it's really kind of the multi-layered story. There's, sometimes a character is the antagonist, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're the foil, maybe sometimes they're the
Hmm.
protagonist even. So,
Something just came to me that might actually give us some insight as to why you are grappling with the vagueness of a wizard's place in D&D. It's because the wizard, and you could probably say the same for a cleric, maybe even for a druid, they're a part of this institution, a
mhm.
wizard school, a wizarding academy, a college, and the cleric has a temple and maybe a temple hierarchy and a congregation, and druids probably have like a druid circle or a druid grove and other associates. Like, you got to design all those NPCs. That's a lot of work to play a
Mhm.
sorcerer, and you're just like the lone wandering wolf, and you don't need any of that stuff, and it's just easier. So that might have something to do with it as well. I guess I'm guilty of this too. I have a number of different wizarding academies in the world of Ikoria that you're currently playing in. How many of them have I fleshed out? One in Bazagon, one to a decent extent in Drekengrim, the Silver Citadel, and then Academy of Cessia in Magdalene. That's still developing as we play. And Indigo Isle, which is also in Bazagon, that's gotten even less development. Like, it's just humans are lazy, damn it. I gotta like think of ideas and write stuff down and remember all these NPCs voices.
There's
Holy
only so
shit,
much
man.
only so much time in a day.
Can't we just like go fight goblins in a dungeon and get the treasure? So
And
that might be why. Just that little, I say little, it could be little, it could be moderately big. That little hurdle, that obstacle, that alone might be enough just to kind of whoosh thing into vague land. It's maybe why your cleric is just from the temple,
mhm.
and you never really go to that temple, and you never really get specific about what you're doing at that temple. I mean, I would think you know how to perform all sorts of rites and rituals and give people spiritual guidance and drive out possessions and cure the sick and the lame.
Yeah. I
Uh,
I just had
yeah.
something come to me actually with talking about this, and it kind of ties in with my Gandalf comparison that I'll kind of elaborate on, which was, sorcerers, their blood is magical. They kind of channel this great power, and they're
Mm-hmm.
able to channel it because I think arcane can sometimes be downplayed in some settings. Arcane is, I mean, you got to think, there's certain monsters that have gone that they're created because of the power that arcane possesses. I think of demi liches, for example. I mean, they're just liches that went mad with arcane
Mm-hmm.
power and became these floating heads of just pure arcane. And so, you know, sorcerers have we'll say, the natural resistance to that power. Warlocks are getting kind of the bite size amount kind of channeled through an already powerful being.
Mm-hmm.
Wizards are kind of going into this solo, having to spend immense amount of time
Mm-hmm.
taking the preparations to protect
self
themselves.
self-made. Well, no, the sorcerer would be very self-made though, like completely self-made. But I see what you're saying. What you're saying is there's no being of higher power that is bestowing the magic onto you.
All
There's
on
not
you.
there's not a god like with a sorcerer, a patron like with a warlock, primal spirits or nature deities like with a druid.
hmm
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think that kind of ties into my Gandalf comparison pretty well. Is that, a lot of people see the pointy hat, the beard, the pipe, maybe the staff, and they think Gandalf. And while that archetype is great to play, I like the staff toting mage. I just like the aesthetic of it personally. Some people might not be
And
into that.
usually older because you have to spend so much time
hmm
pursuing these mysterious things and learning, and it
One of my
takes it takes time to develop that.
one of my favorite Gandalf quotes was, "I used to know all the spells of men, dwarves, and elves," and, ugh, and he's getting frustrated with the door at Moria. And 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 then I told you my absolute all-time favorite line from Gandalf, which was, "There are many forces in this world, Frodo, some for good or evil, and against some I have yet to been tested."
Hmm.
And that's like
Yeah.
that right there sums up Wizard for me. It's this person who's decided to take this journey on their own. They've decided to delve into the arcane mysteries and to practice at it to get better. I mean, it's all about their skill, the time they put into it. It's all on them. And so with the Gandalf thing, what is his ultimate rival? We'll say in like the first movie or the first book, which is, in my opinion, is the Balrog, Durin's Bane, who,
Hmm.
if you know a little bit about Tolkien's lore, the Balrogs are fallen. I can't remember the names of the angels, but they're the fallen angels.
Anor?
Uh, it starts with an A. You're close.
Anor or something like that. Uh-huh.
So they're the fallen angels, right? Gandalf, for people who don't know, they refer to him as a wizard in Middle Earth. He's actually an angel.
Hmm.
All the five wizards are angels.
Hmm.
And the Balrogs are the fallen of that same race of angels. So when you get that dramatic scene of "You shall not pass," and he's facing off with the Balrog, and kind of even before that, when he's thinking about even going into Moria, and you can see it in his eyes that he's just not wanting to go there, and he even says it out loud: "I would not take that path unless there was no other way." He knows that the evil version of him is in there, the
Hmm.
fallen version of him. And these Balrogs were tempted by a very dark and powerful being to kind of give up and maybe give into the madness of power, right? And I see that in a wizard where you're learning all these secrets, you are knowledgeable, and that's always kind of at the edge of your mind, especially if you're trying to make maybe a neutral or a good character,
Hmm.
where you don't want to give in to the madness of arcane. And even if you're an evil character, you don't want to be a slave to the arcane. You want to have the power. You want to have the control. And so the wizard, in that view, is the trope of Gandalf is very important there, because Gandalf is facing against his kin, his brother
Hmm.
in Durin's Bane. And that relationship, he sees what he could become. He fears touching the ring because he sees what he could become.
Hmm.
He knows, he has that knowledge, so therefore his doom is something that's in the forefront of his mind, and he's preparing himself for it. He's turning kind of he's kind of turning the cogs, or maybe pulling the strings in the background a little bit in certain parts of the book. And he's, that's basically the philosophy I've come up with on wizards. Is that is
I like the quote. The some are good, some are evil, and some have yet to be tested. That I think is fantastic. That you can run with and get a lot of mileage out of it. It's kind of an eternal thing, really. You could get endless mileage out of it. Though my personal opinion, when Gandalf came back to life, and then later I found out about the greater Silmarillion lore that he's actually an angel. I Both those things I didn't like as much. I wish he would have been stayed dead and he was just a man.
yeah.
I mean, I say just a man, that he wasn't an angel, that he wasn't some all majestic being, that he was just a really uh, intelligent, skillful, lucky, fated soul. Maybe there was some favor of a deity behind him, but I don't personally don't like it as much. That he's actually an angel and he comes back to life.
Hmm.
Let him be dead, man. Like that. That hit me in the guts. Like, oh, I felt it so much, and then he just comes back, and it's like, oh, you're an
I think
angel.
I think I think it's
How
a
about that? Why don't you just fly the ring to Mount Doom and drop it in there, Mister Angel? What the hell is this CR-15 guy doing in our level 3 campaign?
I see someone said it, Maiar. Not, it doesn't start with an A, it starts with an M. A
Maiar.
Maiar.
Then what the hell's the Anor? I don't know. That's something else.
So Yeah,
We should probably keep an eye on the time here and wrap
yeah.
things up because I feel like we'll keep talking about this forever.
Oh, I think we could. I think it's important to see how Gandalf changes because a lot of people say they like Gandalf the Grey better than Gandalf the White.
Yeah,
And I like Gandalf the Grey better than
yeah,
Gandalf the
me
White
too.
because Gandalf the White is kind of more just it's kind of like you had a character who was really interesting, really cool, kind of down to earth, and then you just kind of made a blaster for the next character.
How many? Maybe not how many. How much time in all Dungeons and Dragons campaigns are spent with angels? 1% of the time,
Hmm.
0.1% of the time, 0.0001%. It's very little
Hmm.
because angel seems like something you aim for, like it's a final reward, like a finish line that you get to. It's over. Like I
Hmm.
made it, the story's done. Once you're actually at angel, it's like the balance is shifted out of that struggle, knowledge of good and evil to all good. It's like, well, it's all good and it's all fine and all beautiful, and we're in the beautiful paradise of light and clouds. We made it. It's done.
Hmm.
The story's over. It doesn't give you that like story traction, like the human struggle, the battle of life and death, good and evil, uh, shadow and light.
Yeah. Yeah, and I maybe Angel's a far cry from what he actually may be, and
Mm-hmm.
I could just be interpreting it a little bit more powerfully.
Celestial being.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Not exactly planetar, but maybe
Deva.
yeah,
Or
something
wait,
of the
no. Solar.
solar.
In between Planetar and
I'm
Deva.
just gonna nod and agree that I know
Yeah.
what they.
All
um,
right. Why don't we wrap this up here? Super interesting topic. I have a feeling we're going to keep talking about this in just like an ongoing pick it up again and again conversation. Thank you for your thoughts and the conversation, and I hope everyone has enjoyed our chat.
Thank you, thank you for having me. I hope to continue to enjoy this campaign for as long as it may last.
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure having you in it, man. I really appreciate it. I'll grab a couple chat questions. I know I've reached kind of the end of my time limit, but uh, farewell for now. I'll catch you later, Ben, and have a good night, man.
Take care.
See ya. Yeah, let me see if I can grab a couple chat questions because I just realized I've already hit my hour mark, but that's okay. Um, I'm just gonna randomly scroll through because I think you all been commenting for this whole stream. I'm gonna randomly scroll through and just pick out questions if there are any. Dunk, dunk, dunk. Okay, there we go. Kaya J asks, if you could have one elemental power, what would it be? So we're talking about the four classical elements: fire, earth, air, water, is what I get from that. Well, let's see. With air, I could fly. That's always an amazing one. Um, earth. What could I do with earth? I do with earth? Could I meld through the earth? Could I tunnel through the earth? Could I turn my body to stone and be impervious to damage? Fire seems fun, throwing fire around. Water. Personally, I do consider myself to be a water spirit. I've always lived around water. I love to swim. I'm a Pisces. Water is my thing. I could swim. I could breathe water. Hmm. Yeah, flying. That's an easy answer. I think everybody would like to fly. So maybe what would I pick other than flying? I would love to be able to transform. So does that seem more like earth or like water? Because Water is fluid, and that gets associated with transformation or mutability. And Earth, is Earth associated with transforming, like transforming into the beasts of the earth? I don't know if this counts as an elemental power, so I'll skip transformation, because transformation, that would be even better. It's like I transform into flying things and swimming things and kind of do anything I wanted. So let's not include transformation. What if with water I could like make it, I could control rainfall, um, water vapor. I could summon up waves. I could swim. I could ride on top of waves. I could speak with aquatic animals. Earth, though, I could like shape things. I could create. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll go with that. An earth power where I can work the soil and the plants. So I could grow mighty trees and plants and gardens and forests, and I could shape the earth, and I could build it into clay structures, homes and buildings. Yeah, I would make a beautiful garden and a beautiful woods and this kind of bard's abode house with that. That would be awesome. And I would grow all kinds of fruits and grains and vegetables, and I could eat them, and I could feed people with it. And like animals would come in, birds and squirrels and rabbits and butterflies. And yeah, that I would go with that. As much as I'm a water spirit, that would be amazing to have this shaping earth, blooming kind of druidic thing. That would be so cool. Let me see if I can find one more question in here. Got a lot of comments. I don't know if there are a lot of questions, because we had a really awesome conversation there. So I think people were just commenting along with it. What is my favorite bard college from D&D? College of Lore is probably my favorite. I like them all. I think they're all good. Glamour's pretty cool, I gotta say. Swords, Valor, I really do like them all. For now, I'm gonna go with Lore. Lore is a big part of what I do, the content that I create, and what I write for my D&D campaigns and my short stories and my fantasy books that I'm working on. Lore is just such a crucial part of that. The secrets, the histories, the ecologies, the societies, all those bits of rich, compelling details and context for what things are and who people are. I find that is inspiration right there. That endlessly inspires me. And the magical secrets, being able to learn spells from any classes, any kind of spell effect, that's just one of the coolest class features I've ever seen. Okay, I'll wrap things up there. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I'll keep this public here for a couple days, and then I'll switch it over to unlisted to go into the archives on my Patreon channel, on my Patreon page, rather. I encourage you to go check that out, take a look, see if there's something on there that would be interesting for you, whether it's the free content or something that you subscribe for. Thank you all very much. I've got a lot of big projects in the works. I guess I didn't talk about them during the stream, but that's okay. You'll see them coming out here over the next couple of weeks. Thank you. Have a good night. Have a good day. May your adventures be many.